Okay, folks, I think we'll call the meeting to order as soon as I find my glasses. All right. As required under the Planning Act, a public meeting is being held prior to the committee making a decision on these applications. First of all, I'll introduce the Committee of Adjustment members. I'm Mr. Robertson, and we've got at the table Ms. Richardson, Ms. Archer, Mr. Erickson, and Mr. Strangway. Very good. And staff here, we have the Director of Development Services, Ms. Berry. We've got Catherine Evans, Planner 2. Mr. Shahid, Planner 2. We've got Mr. Lahi, the Secretary-Treasurer. Ms. Crockford, the Recording Secretary. And present as well is Mr. McKinnon, who is the Plans Examiner, Building and Septic Division. Welcome. Very good. I apologize if I missed anyone. Alrighty. The agenda. Now, the only question I have, the gentleman from Romney Road, you're number 8 on the schedule, sir. I believe you're the lonesome one because the others are our professional planners here representing others. Do you wish us to move it up? What committee, what do you want to do? This gentleman, the professional planners are representing more than one. This gentleman's by himself. Do you want to move that one up, Mr. Strangway? So we'll amend the agenda then to move number 8, I believe it is. Just give me a second here. So that's 80 Romney Ranch Road, Geographic Township of Fenelon. We will amend the agenda so 3.1.8 will be moved up to the first position. All right, so can I get a seconder on that one? Ms. Richardson, any further comments or questions on that? All those in favor? And that carries. So you're number 1 today, sir. All righty. All right, so we got the amended agenda approved. Are there any declarations of pecuniary interest? Being none. The minutes of the previous meeting. Any comments or questions before I ask for a motion? Being none, can I have a mover? Ms. Richardson, seconder. Mr. Erickson, no further comments or questions? All those in favor? And that carries. Thank you. All right, for the benefit of everyone that's here and online, the Committee of Adjustment will hear comments, gather information, and may ask questions to clarify statements made. The committee may ask and answer questions or redirect questions to the appropriate person. Please note that any information or comments given to the committee during this meeting, they are considered evidence. We will first hear from staff, then the applicant or his or her agent. We will then hear from any person in support of or from those who have questions, concerns, or are opposed to the application. Finally, the applicant or his or her agent will have an opportunity to respond to any of the statements made to the committee. Having said all that, we will move to, these pages want to stick together, but I will get it. Okay, this is file number D20-2024-018, and this is 80 Romney Ranch Road, Geographic Township of Fenelon. And Ms. Evans, go ahead.
Excuse me, you said 18, it should be 28.
I'm sorry?
The file number should be 28, not 18.
All right, whatever. I'm easy on that one. Yep. Go ahead, Ms. Evans.
Thank you. The D20 number is 018. The COA number is 028, just to clarify.
We'll carry on.
The subject property is designated waterfront under the City of Kawartha Lakes official plan and is zoned rural residential type 3 under the Township of Fenelon zoning bylaw 12-95. The subject property is located on the southeastern shore of Balsam Lake and currently contains a single detached dwelling, a boathouse, a detached garage, 2 sheds, and a structure for wood storage. The proposal is to tear down the existing boathouse and construct a new boathouse with a rooftop patio and second story. The second story is to cover approximately 34% of the roof area of the story below and is to be used for shade as well as for the storage of furniture. Relief is required from the following sections of the zoning bylaw. Section 3.1.2.2, which requires a minimum side yard setback of 1.2 meters from the side lot line for accessory structures. The existing setback of 1.1 meters is to be maintained. Section 3.1.3.3 of the bylaw, which permits a maximum of 3 accessory structures on a lot in any class of residential zone. The proposed boathouse constitutes the 5th accessory structure. Section 3.1.5.3, which provides that a boathouse shall be limited to 1 story. The proposed boathouse has a second story. And Section 3.1.5.3, which permits a maximum height of a boathouse of 4.5 meters. The proposed height is 6.9 meters. In this table, the 4 requested reliefs are the rows, and the 4 tests of a minor variance are the columns, and the table is just meant to visually summarize the recommendation. As per the report, the recommendation is that reliefs 1 and 4 sought for the minor variance application be granted, provided the proposed boathouse is limited to a single story and may include a rooftop pergola. And that reliefs 2 and 3 sought for the minor variance application be denied, as these reliefs do not meet the tests set out in Section 45(1) of the Planning Act. Through the process of reviewing the application, staff suggested that the proposal be altered to have an open pergola on the rooftop patio instead of a fully enclosed second story, which would provide the desired shade while reducing the bulk and massing of the boathouse and eliminating the need for relief for a second story. In consideration of the above analysis, if the proposal was changed to a 1-story boathouse with a pergola on the rooftop patio, planning would be in a position to support the application. The existing side yard setback of the boathouse is 1.1 meters, and the proposed setback of the new boathouse is to maintain this setback. It is not anticipated that the continuation of this reduced setback for the construction of a new 1-story boathouse would result in adverse impacts to neighboring properties. Additionally, as the boathouse is to be removed and replaced, there is no increase in the number of accessory structures on the property beyond what exists today. As such, reliefs 1 and 4 are considered desirable and appropriate for the use of the land and minor in nature. The existing boathouse is approximately 3.2 meters in height, and the proposed boathouse is to be 6.9 meters. The typical built form of boathouses in this area is a single story. There are 54 residential waterfront properties along Romany Ranch Road, and through a desktop exercise, 28 boathouses were identified. Using information from MPAC, it was found that 24 boathouses are a single story, including the boathouse on the abutting property to the west. The proposed 2-story boathouse is anticipated to be visually imposing when compared to the design and built form of the majority of existing boathouses along this portion of the lake. Additionally, the proposed 6.9 meter high boathouse will result in the shoreline of the subject property appearing overbuilt. As such, reliefs 2 and 3 are not considered desirable and appropriate for the use of the land and are not considered minor in nature. Looking to the official plan, low-density residential uses and buildings and structures accessory to residential uses are permitted in the waterfront designation, with performance and siting criteria being implemented through the zoning bylaw. Reliefs 1 and 4 are considered to maintain the general intent and purpose of the official plan. These photos show the shoreline on either side of the subject property. The official plan contains objectives for the waterfront designation, which includes protecting the established residential character, development design responding directly to natural shoreline character and not significantly altering shoreline character being retained by encouraging non-intrusive uses of the waterfront. As the typical built form of boathouses in this area is one story, the proposal is not in keeping with the character of the area. The proposed height and massing of the boathouse would dominate the shoreline and detract from the view of the water from the property, as well as the view of the property from the water, significantly altering shoreline character. As for policy 20.3.10, provisions such as building and structure height limits are implemented to ensure buildings and structures do not exceed the height of the tree canopy or break the skyline horizon. Building heights should be measured from the lakeside, maintain a low profile, and blend with natural surroundings. The boathouse is to be located directly along the shoreline, and its height will result in the structure standing out starkly against the horizon when viewing the property from the water, as well as from other vantage points, including neighboring properties. As such, reliefs 2 and 3 are not considered to maintain the general intent and purpose of the official plan. The proposal complies with all provisions of the zoning bylaw with the exception of the minimum interior side yard setback for accessory structures, the maximum number of accessory structures, the maximum number of stories for a boathouse, and the maximum height for a boathouse. And these photos show the existing boathouse and the side yard setback, which is to be maintained. Provided the proposed boathouse is limited to a single story and may include a rooftop pergola, it is not anticipated that maintaining the existing reduced setback will result in any impacts to massing, privacy, or drainage. Additionally, the existing setback provides adequate space for any required building maintenance to this side of the proposed boathouse. Regarding the number of accessory structures, the existing and proposed structures are dispersed throughout the property, reducing visual clutter and massing impacts. These photos show the existing and proposed accessory structures with the color of the border around the photo corresponding with the label on the sketch. Provided the proposed boathouse is limited to a single story, the dispersed arrangement of accessory structures provides balance and maintains the dwelling as the visually predominant structure when viewing the property from the street. The proposal complies with the maximum lot coverage for accessory structures. As such, reliefs 1 and 4 are considered to maintain the general intent and purpose of the zoning bylaw. The zoning bylaw's definition of a boathouse excludes habitation and any other use in conjunction with human habitation. The proposed second story is fully enclosed and can be accessed from the exterior of the boathouse. Although the current proposal does not indicate this intention, this configuration could be converted to habitable space. The proposed second story is set back from the shoreline, keeping some of the building's bulk farther back from the water. However, at 6.9 meters in height with a fully enclosed second story, the boathouse will be visually dominant when viewing the property from the water and when viewing the water from dwellings on neighboring properties. As such, reliefs 2 and 3 are not considered to maintain the intent and purpose of the zoning bylaw. No comments of concern were raised by any of these circulated agencies. Comments were received from N. Lee, the owner of 74 Romany Ranch Road, concerning dark sky pollution and the establishment of a dark sky bylaw. The City of Kawartha Lakes does not have a dark sky bylaw. Yesterday evening, the applicant sent 4 photos of boathouses from the owner, who said that they are near the subject property, and those photos have been distributed to committee members. Based on the contents of the report, staff's recommendation that reliefs 1 and 4 sought for the minor variance application be granted, provided the proposed boathouse is limited to a single story and may include a rooftop pergola, and that reliefs 2 and 3 sought for the minor variance application be denied, as these reliefs do not meet the test set out in Section 45(1) of the Planning Act. Thank you.
This may seem like a simple question, but can you explain dark sky? Is that something to do with the visual or shade? What is it?
To the chair, it would be at nighttime when there are a lot of lights on, and it would detract from the view of the night sky.
All right, questions of the, yes, Ms. Archer, go ahead.
Through you, please, to the planner. Do we have any pictures that show from the lakeside up to the boathouse and the cottage in behind, just to see the contrast?
Through the chair, I do have a photo showing the dwelling. It's not part of the presentation.
Can it be put on or no?
Through the chair, from the water, you're looking for a photo taken from the water? No, we don't have that. I would say the ice wasn't as sturdy as we would want it to be.
Thank you. It's just that these pictures, it looks like the homes in behind are much higher than the boathouse, and I just wanted to know if that was the case here, but I'll ask the applicant.
Anything further? Archer, you're finished? Yeah, go ahead, Mr. Strangler.
Thanks. Ms. Evans, I have a number of questions. I noticed that these 4 photographs have been distributed to the committee, all showing 2-story boathouses. You had indicated in the report that there were 4 2-story boathouses along Romany Ranch. Do you have any idea when those boathouses were constructed?
Through the chair, I don't know with these photos if they are in fact along Romany Ranch or if they are at other addresses on the lake. I don't have the addresses. But in terms of the 4 along Romany Ranch, one was constructed in the 60s, one in the 70s, one in 2010 with a minor variance, and one in 2007.
Thanks for that. My understanding, and I agree with you fully on those dates, my understanding being involved with this committee and so on, that we have in recent years, while I was on the committee and before I was on the committee, have approved 2-story boathouses. And the most common request that we were getting from people was they wanted the second story simply for storage.
Is there a question there, Mr. Strangway?
There is. So my question is, I'm having trouble understanding how we can deny this one when right in that area, I'm going to say within 10 to 15 houses, there are at least 2-story boathouses that were granted permission for the purpose of storage. So by denying this, I'm concerned we're being inconsistent as a committee.
Ms. Evans?
Thank you. Through the chair. So each minor variance is evaluated based on the lot and this particular proposal and how it relates to that lot. So there's no precedent set by past minor variances. This goes through the 4 tests based on its own merits, based on this proposal on this particular lot.
Mr. Strangway?
I'm going to save my further questions until the applicant is okay.
Anything further from committee? Ms. Archer?
Through you, please, to the planner. Is 4.5 meters sufficient height to put on a pergola?
Through the chair, I believe we would calculate the pergola as part of the 6.9 meter height, which I would be prepared to support if it was an open pergola as opposed to an enclosed second story.
Anything further from committee? I have one. Oh, I'm sorry. Director, if you, are there further discussions?
Sorry for interrupting the proceedings. No, just conferring with the planner.
My question would be, I believe you said in 2007, Ms. Evans, that we approved a variance for a 2-story there somewhere?
According to MPAC, it was constructed in 2007, but I was not able to find a record of a minor variance for that particular property. It was the 2010 boathouse that I did find the record of the minor variance for.
Right, and how far would that be from the property we're talking about today?
If you'll just give me a moment, I do have the address written down.
I'm just trying to sort of get a picture of the character of the neighborhood there, and
I believe it was 102 Romany Ranch Road.
And that was a minor variance for an actual enclosed second story?
To the chair, that's correct. Yes, I believe it was 102 Romany Ranch Road, but I will defer to the applicant because I believe that was also their file.
Great, thank you. Anything further from committee? All right. Is the applicant here? Do you wish to speak to it, sir? All right, the first thing we'll get is your name, but first, can you turn that, there's a speak button there. And a red light will come on when it's ready to go.
Is that better?
Yeah, and your name is?
My name is Joe McCool.
Okay, go ahead, sir.
I actually have a photo of the house from the lake. If you want to see it, it's on my phone. It's kind of small. I can show it later or now if you like. Just circulate it around.
Miss Archer would like to see it, so, all right.
That's standing beside the boathouse. The boathouse is sort of here.
Can we actually pass that around to the committee? Just for a very quick look?
No. It's lower. I don't have them both in the same picture.
So this is a view from the lakeside?
Yes, that's standing beside the boathouse, probably in that right-hand picture between the two trees looking at the... I have other pictures, I just don't have them on my phone of the whole thing.
No, I thank you for this.
No problem.
All right, go ahead, sir.
Okay, thank you. First of all, thanks for bumping me from number 8 to number 1. If we could see the slide of the 5 outbuildings. Sure. 2 of those outbuildings.
For one of your slides there, would you ask again there, sir?
Yeah, I didn't see the number, what it was. It's the one that's showing the 5. Yeah, right there. Okay. So the middle picture that has the wood, that's 4 feet high, 8 feet wide, 4 feet deep. And I guess because it has a piece of metal on the top to protect the wood, they call it a building. It's way less than 160 square feet, which is what is, anything higher than that requires a building permit. That's strictly wood storage, so that's one of the 5 outbuildings. The top right one is part of the septic system. Anybody familiar with the septic systems? It's called a Waterloo biofilter system. That is part of the septic system for it to ventilate and where the moisture goes. So technically, it's got 4 sides and a top on it. And you could call it a building, but it's about 8 feet by 8 feet by about 5 feet high. They don't even show these on surveys. They just show the septic field area. So taking those 2 out of the equation, we really have the 3 that are allowed, but that's always interpretation. Okay, so the woodshed, it's hard to see on the plan view. It's about halfway up the right-hand side in the green. It's so small you can't really see it. And the Waterloo biofilter is sitting on the, I don't know which color that is. Yeah, oh, there it is, bottom left corner. That's on top of the septic system. So these systems are designed, they don't have weeping tiles going underground. They have a lump of sand, and that's where the liquid goes and dissipates down into the sand, so it's required. So I think maybe some clarification on outbuilding down the road might be helpful with that. So that's one thing, and thanks, Catherine, for showing that. The proposed building is approximately 6'6" higher than what is allowed, just to put it in terms of height. Not offhand, I don't know what that is metric. The tree canopy is about 40 feet that runs beside the property, so we're way below that. There was some concern about being higher than the trees and things like that. These trees are about 40 feet. Next door through those trees is a new 3-story house. So it's not going to affect anything from there. The boathouses that I sent to Catherine, I'm glad that she brought that up. And that's it. That's all I have to say, other than we got back to Catherine, the owner, who couldn't make it here today, with a letter. And it's basically, the whole idea of this is we're using about 30% of the roof space. We're not doing a full 2-story. The reason we're closing it in is because it's exposed. It's on the south end of Balsam Lake, faces north. If you've ever been on Balsam Lake or any body of water that's pretty big, it's wind all the time. So there's going to be umbrellas up there, porch furniture, whatever. And this is a place to store, put the stuff away. We want to make it look nice, so we didn't want to put like a box up there with no windows or doors. So from the lake, it emulates the same as the house with the roof detail. And that's about it. They're going to be using the roof deck for, recreational, hence the stairs to get up and down, and then that gets used for storage. There's no plumbing. The septic review says right on it's not proposed, as it doesn't look like it's going to be, and Catherine has stated that also, it's not to be proposed as habitable. I mean, I don't know what the minimal size of habitation is. So basically you could have anything maybe habitable down the road, but that is not the intent here at all. It's to get the furniture away. It's a seasonal cottage. So in the off season, in the winter especially, just lock everything up and keep it out of harm's way. And that's pretty much it. I don't think there's anything else to point out. Nope, I think that's it. Any questions at all?
Thank you, sir. Mr. Strangway, questions?
Thanks for coming, Mr. McCool. One question I'd have is, what would the height of the second story be?
The legal height is measured to the midpoint of the roof. So it's not misleading at all. I mean, I'm a designer, so I know what that means, but it's not to the peak. So what's allowable now, the maximum height is 14'9". I'm not well versed in metric because of my experience, let's say. So you can almost make it out above the deck. There's a little point there that shows the existing. It's a little faint in that. We're higher than that. The allowable is higher than what's there now. And so between what we're allowed and to the point of the peak is 6'6". The allowable is actually taken from the halfway. We're 6'6" from the allowable to the midpoint. So, but we're well below what the house is, or the cottage, let's say.
So just to be clear, if I was standing in that second story,
If you're standing,
if I was standing in there, what would the ceiling height be in there?
it'll be 8 feet, 7.5 feet or 8 feet maybe. It probably shows right there. No, it just shows the door height.
I guess the problem we have is that we see these 2-story boathouses coming, and there's always a concern that people after the fact are going to put in plumbing and kitchens and so on. I take it quite clearly from the owner that this is not the intention of this area.
No, it's a small area. It's 200 and some odd square feet, the second floor. I mean, it's open deck. 3/4 of the roof on the lower part of the boathouse is just flat deck. This is at the very back. And it's about 200 square feet, so it's not big. I mean, again, it depends what you call habitable space.
Okay, thanks for those answers. Appreciate it.
No problem.
Are there questions of the applicant? All right, being none, thank you, sir. All right. Is there anyone here or online wishing to speak in support of this application? Anyone here or online wishing to speak in opposition to this application? Opposition to the application? All right, committee, Mr. Strangway?
Thanks. If I can just make a few comments. As I said earlier, where I struggle with this is the fact that I know we have approved some of these in the recent past. Looking at the situation on Balsam Lake, which I'm familiar with, I would say, I'm going to guess 50% of the new boathouses I see are 2 stories. And in many cases, they're for this exact purpose, is that people want a place to store things and so on, and really have no intention of putting living quarters above there. What I struggle with is how on Romany Ranch we can approve 2 of these in recent years. There are 2 more there, and when you go across the lake, these 4 pictures are all taken, I believe, if I'm correct, from across the lake. They're as common as can be. So what I would do is I'm going to put forward a proposal to approve this application, all 4 sections.
All right, do I have a seconder? Mr. Erickson? All right, do you want to speak further to it, Mr. Strangway?
No, as I indicated, and perhaps the new consolidated bylaw will deal with this. I think as a committee, we need to be consistent. And I don't know how we can turn one down and then approve another one. And I'm quite sure neighbors within a community are look around and say, what is in the community? And they do look for that consistency. I think the fact that this is the back section of the boathouse, it's clearly been indicated that in good faith it is for storage, that I can certainly support this proposal. And that's where I'm at with it. We'll see how the committee feels about it.
Mr. Erickson?
I support it. Yes, it is twice as high as it should be, but I like the glassed face in it. I think goes a long way to helping it.
Further comments from, Ms. Archer?
Just have one comment, in that both of the neighbors, one only concerned about the night sky, which we don't deal with. Neither one of them was concerned about the heights other than that, so I'm in favor as well.
Further comments? I guess I just have a question of the planner, Ms. Evans. Your concern wasn't necessarily with the fact that it might contribute to a habitable space, but you were also, you mentioned massing. And you're saying 2010, I believe there was a minor variance approved for this, or for another one on the lake there, for a fully enclosed 2-story boathouse, even though the massing probably was an issue then. So what is your main concern today with respect to the massing, if that's the case and we're told there's 4 others within some distance?
To the chair, it would be the appearance of the shoreline appearing overbuilt because of the size and massing of this boathouse, as well as when viewing the water from adjacent properties and the view of this boathouse being there. I think it would be the same concerns that were probably brought to the minor variance in 2010 from the planner.
So, I'm trying to get where to go here with this, because I understand you to some degree what you're saying about massing, but these other 2-story boathouses, are they within visual distance of? Obviously, they are. I think you said this one's at 80, and you said the other one was 102 or something like that.
To the chair, that's correct. I believe it was 102. No, they wouldn't be, they're not adjacent to this particular property. The boathouse that is next to 80 Romany Ranch Road is a single story.
Mr. Chair.
Yes, Mr. I'm sorry. Director, sorry, I'm sorry, go ahead.
Not at all. Thank you for the opportunity. I did hear the member ask a question, or maybe suggestion, regarding the rural zoning bylaw consolidation project and how perhaps boathouses are to be treated in the rural zoning bylaw. So to address the member's comments, this was a matter that was reviewed through the rural zoning bylaw consolidation. And the final draft of the rural zoning bylaw maintains the 4.5-meter height requirement, so essentially the single story. And it was a consideration over the past number of years, similarly with how accessory structures were viewed, garages. The committee is well aware that increased height variances proposals come through very regularly. And so as part of the rural zoning bylaw process, it was incumbent on the project team to look at the sort of repeat application proposals and to see where, if anywhere, there was merit in addressing whole scale in the new zoning bylaw these sorts of reliefs to perhaps prevent the number of future variances coming forward. And this was a feature that, on balance, looking at all considerations for a global increase to boathouses, that it should still remain on a site-by-site analysis and evaluation by this committee, unlike relief that was and is suggested through the zoning bylaw for accessory buildings like garages to have an increased height. It was very intentional and mindful on the part of the project team to maintain that 4.5 meters because of the, as Planner Evans has referred to, impact to the viewscape along the shoreline, predominantly with things like massing, and to maintain the character of the shorelines. Now, of course, that comes into question when we see properties over time, and this is spanning 20 years, 15 years, for the examples that have been brought up, looking at how incrementally the shoreline starts to take on a different look. And there's a sort of cumulative impact over time, and the question will continue to come to the committee on how many is too many, and where's the threshold, and have we reached it, and is it this application that's going to push the shoreline character over. And now, yes, we have every property that has gone through an application and been evaluated for whether in that site, in that spot, that a higher profile is actually appropriate and reasonable. Just another reminder, if I could, for another moment, Mr. Chair, the fairness point, and Planner Evans did address this, and I'll just sort of underscore that the committee is responsible for a fair and consistent approach to decision making. But that is very different to having the result of that decision making be the same answer. So long as the committee is satisfied that they have taken the same consistent, fair approach to the evaluation of the 4 tests, it is absolutely and entirely reasonable to expect that there could be a different outcome because the circumstances are different per lot. Otherwise, there wouldn't be a need to evaluate the 4 tests, and the decisions would be governed by precedent, which, of course, isn't what we expect and what the Act expects of the committee.
Any questions from committee of the director? All right. Any further comments or questions with respect to the motion on the floor? And it was, shall we call it an amendment to go with the 4 variances then? Nothing further, Mr. Strangway?
If I may make one further comment, it's interesting looking at these pictures. I think boathouses have changed. I think when they were originally done, you think about many along Romney Ranch or Balsam Lake, the old ones were very standard single-car garages. And you look at these now, what we're seeing along the lake shores are very creatively done, very well done, and just like in Muskoka, boathouses are a thing of pride. And I think, my concerns around massing are alleviated by the fact that these are often very attractive buildings. So, thank you.
All right. I'm going to call the question. All those in favor? And that carries. All right. Mr. McCool, the application is approved. All right. And I owe you gentlemen an apology because I was of the opinion that Mr. McCool was in fact an applicant, and he is in the same boat as you gentlemen. So, Mr. Carroll, are you just representing one of the applications? It's 02 and And you, sir, too. All right. So are you content that as I say, I apologize to you because I didn't realize Mr. McCool was in fact in the same boat as you folks. But are you okay if we just continue on then, rather than moving things around? All right. Thank you. All right. We're now dealing with file number D20-2024-011, and this is 22 and 24 Camp Street, Geographic Township of Fenelon. Go ahead, Ms. Evan.
Thank you. The subject properties are designated waterfront under the City of Kawartha Lakes official plan and are zoned limited service residential under the Township of Fenelon zoning bylaw 12-95. The properties are within an established residential neighborhood located on the southeastern shore of Balsam Lake. The purpose of the application is to facilitate a lot line adjustment. Provisional consent was granted on February 9th, 2024 to sever approximately 937 square meters of land from the property identified as 22 Camp Street, marked with an R for retained on the sketch, to be added to the property identified as 24 Camp Street, marked with B for benefiting. Relief is required from section 15.2.1.2C of the bylaw, which requires a minimum frontage of 35 meters. The resulting lot frontage for the retained lot is 31 meters. Looking to the official plan, low-density residential uses and buildings and structures accessory to residential uses are permitted in the waterfront designation. As per policy 33.3.7 of the official plan, consents which do not have the effect of changing boundary lines or which do not create additional or buildable lots should be evaluated on their own merits. In this case, no new lot is being created as a result of the proposed severance. The shoreline frontage of both the severed and retained lot will continue to be consistent with the established character of the adjacent shoreline. The photo on the left shows the frontage along Camp Street, and the photo on the right was taken within the property, showing its open and almost park-like nature. The proposed lot line adjustment complies with all provisions of the zoning bylaw with the exception of the minimum lot frontage. The minimum lot area in the LSR zone is 2,000 square meters, and the retained lot will continue to exceed this minimum. The retained lot will remain sufficiently sized to accommodate development, adequate amenity space, and water infiltration, and it is not anticipated that the proposed reduced frontage would impact the ability to install private services or establish a building envelope that complies with the provisions of the zoning bylaw in the future if desired. There are no anticipated impacts on environmental features, neighboring properties, or the function of the right-of-way. No comments of concern were raised by any of these circulated agencies, and no comments were received from members of the public. Based on the contents of the report, staff acknowledges the application meets all 4 tests of a minor variance and respectfully recommends approval of the application subject to the conditions identified within the report. Thank you.
Thank you. Any questions of the planner? Ms. Archer?
Through you to the planner, please. Is the cabin on the retained or the benefiting property?
Through the chair, if you'll just give me a moment, I need a closer look at the sketch. Through the chair, it is on the portion that is to be severed and donated to the benefiting. So I'll use my pointer here. Just here. So this piece is going to the benefiting lot.
So on the retained land, there'd be no buildings at all?
Through the chair, there is a boathouse here.
Is it allowed to stay there without a residence?
Through the chair, this was evaluated as part of the consent application, and because the buildings predate the zoning bylaw and no new lot is being created and under this proposal, it was determined that no reliefs were required for these existing buildings.
Further questions to the planner? Ms. Richardson, go ahead.
Through you, what was the purpose of the severance? Had that not happened, this application would not be before us.
Through the chair, the intent of adding frontage to the benefiting lot was so it was comparable to other lots on the street, including a lot just to the south that is also owned by the property owner, so for equal frontage.
Doesn't make sense to me because now the lot next to it will be much smaller.
Is that a question, Ms. Richardson?
No, it's just a statement.
Anything further from committee to the planner? All right. Is the applicant here? Does the applicant wish to speak? Mr. Carroll, I see that you wouldn't have had an argument one way or the other with our schedule. What were you, 1 and 2?
That's correct, Mr.
All
Chairman.
right.
No argument so long as
All right, go ahead, sir.
we proceed. We agree with the staff recommendation that the minor variance be authorized. We agree with the conditions. We agree that the application fulfills the 4 tests of the Planning Act, and I'm happy to answer whatever questions you have,
You're looking for questions?
if there are any, yes.
Mr. Erickson, go ahead.
Chair, does the applicant or the owner own each of those 3 lots?
One brother owns part 1, a slightly younger brother owns part 2, and that's why the 2 brothers who jointly own the right hand, or the easterly part 1, want to have the same size lots. It's the only reason the application came forward. The family owns the abutting lot to the east, the abutting lot to the further east, and the 3 lots to the south. It's similar to what we might characterize as a family compound, but 2 siblings own 2 vacant lots. They own together the lot that's going to be reduced in frontage if the variance is approved.
One other question. So with the individual ownerships, call them, so there are no technical severances needed to split the ownership of the lots?
The severance is, it's a severance. It's not qualified by technical or any other term. It's a severance from the 2 brothers transferring a portion of their property. The seventh, if you could go back to the other sketch, please, showing the, thank you. So the 2 brothers own the land that is identified as R and S. S will be severed from the 2 brothers and consolidated with 1 brother that owns the B identified property. It's a severance. It's not technical, it's a severance. It's a lot line adjustment. The family, excuse me, Mr. Chairman. The family uses the property owned by the 2 brothers as communal property and communal recreation property for at least 3 families within the current ownership and developed lots in the area.
Further questions of committee? All right, Mr. Carroll, anything further? No?
No, thank you, Mr.
All
Chairman.
right, thank you. All right. Is there anyone here online wishing to speak in support of this application, in support of the application? Anyone here online wishing to speak in opposition to this application, opposition to the application? Committee, where are we? Ms. Archer?
Printed.
Do I have a seconder? Mr. Erickson? Any further comments or questions with respect to the motion on the floor? Being none, all those in favor? And that carries. Your application is approved, sir. All right. Moving right along, we're dealing now with file number D20-2024-012, and this is 653 Hickory Beach Road, Geographic Township of Verlin. Ms. Evans, go ahead. And thank you very much for your pointer exercise there. That's very much appreciated.
Thank you. The subject property is designated waterfront under the City of Kawartha Lakes official plan and is zoned residential type 1, exception 9 under the Township of Verulam zoning bylaw 6-87. The subject property is within an established residential neighborhood located on the northeastern shoreline of Sturgeon Lake. It currently contains a single detached dwelling with attached garage constructed in 2002 and a boathouse. The purpose of the application is to fulfill a recommended condition of approval pertaining to consent application D03-2023-030 to facilitate the creation of one new residential lot. The existing dwelling will remain on the retained lot, and the existing boathouse will remain in its current location on the severed lot. Relief is required from the following sections of the zoning bylaw. Section 8.3.9A, which requires a minimum lot area of 0.9 hectares. The resulting lot area is 0.6 hectares for the severed parcel and 0.58 hectares for the retained parcel. Section 8.3.9B, which requires a minimum lot frontage of 47 meters. The resulting lot frontage is 25 meters for the severed parcel and 25 meters for the retained parcel. Section 4, which defines accessory as, when used to describe a use, building, or structure, as a use, building, or structure that is incidental, subordinate, and exclusively devoted to a main use, building, or structure and located on the same lot therewith. The existing boathouse on the severed parcel would remain temporarily as a standalone structure without a main use until a new dwelling is constructed. And Section 5.1.3c, which provides that a boathouse, gazebo, dock, or pump house may be erected in the front yard or within the water setback on a lot which abuts a lake or river, provided it does not have a height greater than 4 meters from the highest point of the building or structure to finished grade. The existing boathouse is located within the water setback and is 4.5 meters in height. Looking to the official plan, low-density residential uses and buildings and structures accessory to residential uses are permitted in the waterfront designation. For new lot creation in this designation, infilling residential lots are permitted provided the lots are not less than 3,000 square meters in area with a minimum lot frontage of 30 meters, and that shoreline frontage is consistent with established character. While the proposed frontage for the severed and retained parcels are less than 30 meters, the frontage will remain consistent with the frontages of surrounding existing lots. In this air photo, the subject property is outlined in blue and the neighboring properties are in orange for comparison. Both the severed and retained lots exceed 3,000 square meters, and the shoreline frontage of both lots will remain consistent with surrounding water frontages. Furthermore, policy 33.3.5 provides that the size of any parcel of land created by consent should be appropriate for the proposed uses and the services available. The proposed sizes of both the severed and retained lots are appropriate for residential uses with private individual services. The proposal complies with all provisions of the zoning bylaw, with the exception of the minimum lot area, minimum lot frontage, definition of accessory, and maximum height for a boathouse located within the water setback. The proposed lot area and frontage of the severed and retained parcels are sufficient for stormwater infiltration and for the accommodation of development within a building envelope that complies with the provisions of the zoning bylaw. Adequate amenity space will be maintained, and it is not anticipated that the proposed reduced lot frontage and lot area would impact the ability to install private services. These photos show the existing boathouse, for which relief is required to permit the accessory structure on a lot without a primary use. The granting of a variance will allow the accessory use to continue without a primary use until the decision of the Committee of Adjustment lapses. After this time, a primary use will need to be established for the accessory structure to be compliant with the zoning bylaw. Regarding the height of the existing boathouse, it is 1 story, preventing accessory residential uses from occurring in the upper level. The boathouse has existed in this location since 2000 and is not proposed to change. As such, adverse impacts are not anticipated to result from the boathouse being a standalone structure on the severed lot until a primary use is established. There are no anticipated impacts on environmental features, neighboring properties, or the function of the municipal right-of-way. No comments of concern were raised by any of the circulated agencies. Questions were received from a neighboring property owner looking to clarify what was to happen with the existing boathouse, which have been addressed. No other comments were received from members of the public. Based on the contents of the report, staff acknowledges the application meets all 4 tests of a minor variance and respectfully recommends approval of the application subject to the conditions identified within the report. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Evans. Questions of the planner? All right. Is the applicant here? Does the applicant wish to speak to it? Mr. Carroll, go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. We agree with the staff recommendation that the variances should be authorized. The application is appropriate. We agree with the evaluation provided and the explanation with regards to how the application fulfills the 4 tests under the Planning Act. With regard to condition 2, I would ask that it be expanded to include the following. This condition will be considered fulfilled upon completion of the companion consent application D03-2023-030. The reason for the request, Mr. Chairman, is because the variance is to permit that use to exist without a principal use. And the application and the staff report support that variance to be granted as meeting the 4 tests. There's no objection from any agency, any neighbor, that they are concerned about the absence of a dwelling on the property now or within 2 years, or within 4 years, or 8 years, or 10 years, or ad infinitum. I suggest that it is appropriate to allow the owner or subsequent owner to determine when their situation warrants the construction of a detached dwelling on the property in accordance with the provisions of the zoning bylaw. I understand it may be a concern to some in the room that it's possible that that boathouse could become a dwelling. It's not connected to a septic system. It's not built to the building code to be a dwelling. The neighbors raised questions about what would become of the dwelling, what would become of the boathouse, and a future boathouse on the retained lot. They did not raise a concern about existing boathouse becoming a dwelling. So that's why we asked that the 2-year restriction proposed by staff be qualified and removed, and it would be removed by virtue of the addition that I asked for, that this condition will be considered fulfilled upon the completion of the companion consent application being finalized, the lot being registered. Then the zoning bylaw controls the use of the land, not a subjective opinion from staff with respect to a minor variance with regards to a 25-year-old building staying on the property, and all we're creating with the severance application is a property line and a new vacant residential lot. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
All right, before I go to committee, I'm going to go to Ms. Evans, and you heard what Mr. Carroll had to say. What is your response?
Thank you. Through the chair, just a question for the applicant. So the goal of amending the condition would be to permit the boathouse to exist without a primary use forever, essentially?
Yes?
Through the chair, the appropriate route for having an indefinite approval like that would be a zoning bylaw amendment. Minor variances have these sunset clauses, so the approval lapses after a specified amount of time.
Committee question of the applicant or planner? Mr. Berry?
Just wondering, up to this point, have you had to submit an up-to-date land survey and showing where the boathouse is and so forth?
Yes, with the severance application.
Anything further from committee? Just one question I have, Mr. Carroll. On page 4 of 9, the second last paragraph there, it says the intent of the property owners is that the new lot be a residential building lot. Are they intending on selling it as a residential lot? Are they intending to build on it? What's the situation at this point in time?
I've been told it may go to one of their children. It may go to a relative of the nuclear family circle, and it may be sold in the private market to someone arm's length, not in the family or
So,
friendship circle.
so we don't know, bottom line.
I've not been told. I know they're concerned. In fact, they might even transfer the retained property to one of their children. They may build their retirement home on the lot to be created, which would include the existing boathouse.
All right, thank you. Anything further of the applicant or the planner? All right, thank you, Mr. Carroll.
Thanks.
Is there anyone online or here wishing to speak in support of this application, in support of the application? Anyone online or here wishing to speak in opposition to the application? Opposition to the application? Being none, committee, where are we?
Mr. Chair.
Ms. Richardson. I'm sorry. I sometimes don't look to the left as much as I should. Go ahead, Director. I apologize for that.
Not at all. I should project. Thank you for catching me. If this wasn't clear either through the report or through the presentation, it may benefit the committee to just take a step back to the conditions and the consent application that is companion or sort of being processed in parallel with this minor variance. Conditional approval or provisional consent hasn't yet been granted to the consent. This is a little unconventional to have the minor variance, which otherwise would be a condition of provisional consent. That's customarily when the committee sees such an application. In anticipation, though, the owner, through their applicant, Mr. Carroll, have submitted the minor variance application, and of course, we're processing it accordingly. However, I make the distinction or just remind you of the sequence here because the consent is being processed also with the understanding, as applied for, that the intention is to create a future residential building lot. So I bring this to your attention because if the committee has further questions or sees it fit to deliberate further, and or with the consent application, know that that is within your purview to do. And the consent application can come to the committee for decisions to be made on both the consent application and the variance as they are intersected. So know that that is not typical because, meaning that opportunity is not typical because typically you do see the minor variance application or rezoning, sometimes also, whatever a companion application is made a condition of approval. The approval hasn't yet been granted by the approval authority, which in addition to your committee is the Director of Development Services. If there's any questions on that, or if you need further clarification, let me know.
I don't know. Mr.
To the chair, so you're saying leave the recommendations or the conditions as they are, don't change them?
Through the chair, that is exactly what I'm saying. The minor variance condition is specific in the draft conditional approval that has been issued by the Planning Division for review by Mr. Carroll and his client. So that is the spirit in which the conditional approval draft has been provided to the applicants to ultimately make their decision. But that is the position of staff, yes.
Mr. Carroll, do you have any response to what the director has to say? In all fairness, I'll let you do if you wish.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chairman. With regards to the minor variance versus a zoning bylaw amendment matter, the neighborhood has been canvassed by the posted notice and the circulation of the notice to adjacent property owners. They have no concern, or have not expressed concern to date. A zoning bylaw would simply pose the same question, the same land use issues would arise, but you would contact people further away from the subject land. With respect to creating the lot, I'm not aware that the Committee of Adjustment has, or the city has ever created a lot, a vacant lot, residential lot, and imposed a condition that a dwelling be constructed at any time because it's permitted under the zoning bylaw. The only reason staff are saying, I think the only reason staff are saying we want a 2-year limit here is because the boathouse exists. And I don't see how a boathouse existing or a bunkie or a detached garage or a woodshed, an accessory structure, is related at all to the permission granted in the municipality zoning bylaw. It says a detached dwelling is a permitted use at any time the owner wants to construct it. So I'm questioning the subjectivity of the analysis that says, in this context, you must build a dwelling within 2 years.
I guess if I may, yes, Director, you wish.
Sure, Mr. Chair, through you. Certainly agree that as of right zoning would certainly have single detached dwellings as the principle of use permitted as of right. It isn't customary to create non-conforming situations through a decision of the committee, and ultimately that would be what would happen. So we're looking at a way to both, well, achieve a couple of things. Assist the owners in getting to the place where they want to get. Ultimately, that's creating a vacant lot that then something else can be done with, but also respecting the intentions of the zoning bylaw and the process. Having a new use or an accessory use currently become a standalone primary use in perpetuity, there is a path to get there, and the path to do that is through the zoning bylaw. The minor variance process essentially allows the committee to grant approval for somebody to get from point A to point B. In the case of building an addition or an accessory building, relief is granted, building permit is applied for, issued, and the subsequent construction takes place. Once that period of time is over, the variance decision has lapsed, the new development has taken place, whatever relief the committee granted, creating that otherwise non-compliant situation, that forever afterwards remains non-compliant. It is legal because it was a decision through the committee under the Planning Act, but that doesn't afford any future additional addition, so to speak, or other improvement to the property to enjoy the same relief that was previously granted. That would be subject to a new review under another variance. So the committee isn't granting permissions for uses or non-compliances to go on in perpetuity, and that's the role of council.
If I may, just to you, where do these time frame come from? And I know we see them all the time in these conditions, but so let's say the 24-month or the 12-month, or I don't know that we've ever gone beyond 24, but I'm just curious as to where they come from.
They are determined by the committee, and they can change, and they can be modified at the committee's discretion. On occasion, for example, with enforcement issues, they can be substantially reduced down to a number of months, 3, 6. On occasion, the committee has granted longer periods, 36 months, 48. In my experience in the past 6 years with the city, I don't believe we've gone further than 48. In fact, I'd have to even question that. I know we've gone to 36. That was during the pandemic. There was issues with supply chain and trades and being able to complete construction within a reasonable amount of time. Beyond that, I would encourage the committee to consider what the effect of their decision is. if it was to go on for longer, especially in light of, well, a couple of things. One, of course, that there is another process to make these kinds of reliefs permanent, that being through a rezoning process. And also, if the bylaw were to change, be repealed and replaced by a new bylaw, the relief granted through that variance doesn't stay with the property. The relief is to the bylaw that is in play at the time of the committee's decision. So that would be impacted, for example, by the forthcoming rural zoning bylaw. So any decision that this committee makes to the current zoning bylaw in this case will be in fact in play just for as long as that zoning bylaw is also in play.
If, and just one last one, I don't mean to belabor it, but I'm just trying to get it clear in my mind. So if the applicant were to come back here on the very last day of the 24-month period and say, I want an extension because I haven't been able to complete things, would that person then have to come back in front of the Committee of Adjustment for an extension, or would staff refuse the extension, or would staff grant an extension? What happens there?
Yeah, so Mr. Chair, there is no ability for a condition to be extended. That time frame, that is the committee's decision. The Planning Act doesn't provide for, either in Section 45 or the related regulation, any ability to change that condition, only through a new variance application. Staff doesn't have the ability either. So neither the committee nor staff have the ability to change a condition, which would include a lapsing date.
You've been very helpful. I appreciate it. All right. Anything further from committee, the applicant, or? All right, thank you, Mr. Carroll. Very much appreciated. All right, committee, Mr. Eric.
I recommend approval as written.
Seconder, Ms. Richardson. All right, any further comments or questions with respect to the motion on the floor?
Just so I can be clear, the motion on the floor does not include what Mr. Carroll asked be included in it?
No, he asked for the motion to be amended to, relative to condition 2, and we've got a motion on the floor that it's going to go as printed, so no, it doesn't. Before you leave, Mr. Carroll, I just want to see, all right, any further comments from the committee? I certainly understand where you're coming from, but I guess I would say that, and I agree with staff, that if there were not some conditions with respect to timeframes, you know, people are people, and we'd end up with a boathouse with potentially somebody living in it. I realize what you said, and I don't disagree at all, but these things happen. And as well, do you just let it go into eternity with, well, you know, just hanging there sort of thing? So at the end of the day, I agree there have to be some time frames, so we'll adhere to what staff is recommending. I'll afford you one last comment. Go ahead.
Mr. Chairman, if any one of the people in this room created a severance without an accessory building on it, the Committee of Adjustment or the director would not likely impose a 2-year, a 3-year, or a 4-year deadline for constructing the dwelling on that created lot. One of the earlier reports we got from the township staff was the client has the option of demolishing the boathouse. That would be a financial hardship. It would be unnecessary. It would serve no greater compatibility from a land use perspective with the adjacent or the abutting residential lots. It would be punitive. And I respectfully suggest that the condition, as written by staff, is also punitive. The variance was already deemed appropriate by staff. They wrote the report confirming professionally it's appropriate. We've decided arbitrarily that 2 years is the time frame within which the owner should construct, or the next owner should construct a detached dwelling on the property. That's not the function.
There have to be some rules, though, and I guess that's
I'm not saying there isn't, sir, but I'm saying there is no rule in the Planning Act, there's no rule in the city's official plan, and there's no rule in the zoning bylaw because you granted the variance. No neighbor has raised a land use compatibility issue. it's in the eyes of the staff and the committee that there is an incompatibility after 2 years. And I just don't see how that's been explained here.
All right, well, it sounds to me like some of these, yourself included, perhaps as professional planners, perhaps should be discussing more things with our planning office. It sounds to me like what you're saying is not unreasonable, certainly. So, but given the fact that we have applications coming here and staff have made a recommendation to us that we do this, and I think most of us agree that there have to be some rules in place regarding time, because if we didn't, as I said, people are people. So we'll leave it there, but I would suggest to you that maybe you need to talk to our planning staff, not just you, but planners around. We've got a number of professional planners around, and see maybe where we can go from there. But we can't define or discuss or fix that today. So thank you.
Mr. Chair.
All right.
Mr. Chair. If you'll indulge in response, if the applicant hadn't considered prior, there is perhaps now no longer an opportunity to ask him, as he's just left the room. The suggestion was going to be twofold. One, to discuss a more reasonable timeline, because we absolutely agree in this case, arbitrary perhaps, but consistent with other decisions the committee makes, but certainly within your wheelhouse to extend that time period, number one. But number two, to also defer. That's absolutely an option on the table, to defer the minor variance, to both provide that further opportunity for discussion with staff, but also to give the applicant an opportunity with his client to discuss coming back to this committee with both the consent and the variance together. That's also within your with your governance.
And I guess what I would say, he's gone. So we didn't, I think Mr. Carroll was looking at no time frame with respect to it. Just leave it and let it hang forever until the applicant decides they wish to do something with it, which I don't agree with either. But Ms. Richardson, go ahead.
Having heard what the director has said, I would be willing to withdraw my second to that motion, and if Mr. Erickson agreed with withdrawing his, then I would put forward a motion to defer until such time as a consent comes forward as well.
Erickson, the motion was yours. Are you content to amend the motion to, actually, you're going to change the motion, not amend it, to a deferral. So are you okay with that?
Could I ask a question first?
Yeah, go ahead.
To the director, would it cost the applicant more money for a deferral?
Through the chair, not as far as application processing fees go. However, if they were here, they might suggest that the addition of time is also financially burdensome to them. So delaying a decision, so to speak, would be impactful. But I'm speculating here, as that's not been made known to us.
I guess, just to speak as a member of the committee, my problem with the deferral is that Mr. Carroll, I think, was suggesting that there shouldn't be any time frames with respect to these. So I'm not so sure on this application that us deferring it really is going to resolve anything. Just my opinion, because I know where from hearing him, they don't want any time frame. They just want the consent to go ahead and forget about the, Mr. Erickson, go ahead.
On the one hand, I can understand the deferral so that it runs with the other application, and both can be looked at the same time, at the same meeting. On the other hand, I prefer to have a definite time period, as with the chair, simply because everything across Ontario is in a state of flux, and I don't think we want to start creating more rules and conditions. I would prefer we just stick to what we've been doing, but I would agree to a deferral to run with the application, but no extension in time.
Well, and I hear you, as the chair, and I'm just suggesting to the committee that perhaps we should deal with this application on its own merits now. It's here, we've got a motion on the floor as printed, and we can look at the next one, maybe if there's another one, if they're the same argument. But with this one here, I know where Mr. Carroll was going. He was looking at no restrictions whatsoever, and I'm with Mr. Erickson. I couldn't agree with that. So do you want to attempt a deferral, or do you want to leave it as the motion on the floor is printed?
I prefer the motion on the floor for clarity.
No, I'll continue.
Sure, go ahead.
Just one quick question. If the time frame, something's echoing, but anyway, if the time frame goes to 25 months, it's not automatic. Like, is this one of those things that somebody has to be complaint driven? Like, the thing just doesn't automatically have to come down, does it, the boathouse?
Director? No.
It would eventually be, as with any situations that are non-conforming across the city, course of action would be taken, but certainly the day after, no, we wouldn't expect anything to take place.
Question with the motion on the floor. All those in favor? And that, you're opposed, Mr. Strangway? Pardon?
I'm opposed.
Opposed. Mr. Richardson? Ms. Archer? All right. Mr. Strangway? Opposed? And I'm in favor. All right. Carries. All right. Moving right along. We are now dealing with file number D20-2024-013, and this is 8 Canberra Street, Geographic Township of Emily. Mr. Shahi, go ahead, sir. You've been fairly quiet there.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. The subject property is situated on the northern shore of Pigeon River with access from Canberra Street. The residential build form within the neighborhood consists primarily of 1 to 2-story single detached dwellings with varying proximities to the road and shoreline. The property currently contains a 1-story dwelling, detached garage, and 2 sheds. In terms of municipal legislation, the property is designated waterfront under the City of Kawartha Lakes official plan and zoned rural residential type 3 or the RR3 zone under the Township of Emily zoning bylaw. The proposal is to demolish the existing dwelling, detached garage, and remove one of the sheds on the property to allow for the construction of a new 1-story dwelling with a basement walkout and rear deck. Relief is required from 2 provisions of the zoning bylaw. Firstly, the zoning bylaw requires a minimum 30-meter water setback. The proposed water setback is 25.41 meters. It's important to mention that the zoning bylaw does not include the first 4 meters of an unenclosed deck in the water setback. The proposed deck is 3.05 meters in width and is therefore not included in that setback measurement. Secondly, the zoning bylaw requires a 3-meter interior side yard setback for buildings less than 2 stories or 5.5 meters for a building 2 stories or greater. As a basement walkout is considered an additional story in the zoning bylaw, the proposal must comply with the provisions applicable for a 2-story dwelling. The proposed side yard setback here is 4.55 meters on the east side and 3.1 meters on the west side. If you refer to the slide, you'll see the current water setback from the existing dwelling is non-compliant at 9.4 meters. The proposed development includes a new septic system in the front yard, which is best to be located as distant as possible from the shoreline. In consideration of that, the proposed water setback of 25.41 meters increases the buffer between build form and water by more than 2 times than what is currently present. It is also important to mention that the dwelling is actually set back greater than 30 meters from the majority of the shoreline. However, it's just that the existing boat slip extends onto the property, bringing the distance between the water and build form closer. Moving to the interior side yard, the property is guarded by a dense hedge on both the eastern and western side lot lines, guarding the views from and to the neighboring properties. If you refer to the images on the slide, you'll see in the image to the left, the existing distance from the detached garage to the western side lot line is very narrow. By removing the existing detached garage, greater yard amenity space is going to be provided. And this is evident as the western side yard setback where the garage currently is going to be increased to 3.1 meters from the proposed dwelling. Furthermore, the eastern side yard setback, although deficient, is proposed at 4.55 meters, which continues to allow for more than enough space to move freely from the front yard to the rear yard, or for general maintenance. And overall, the proposed setbacks, although deficient, are an improvement over the existing setbacks and continue to maintain the intent of the zoning bylaw for the reasons mentioned in the report. For comments after the writing of the report, Kawartha Conservation stated that they have no concern with the approval of the application and that the applicant has already obtained a permit from them. In conclusion, based on the contents of the report, staff acknowledges the application meets all 4 tests of a minor variance and respectfully recommends approval of the application subject to the conditions identified within the report. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Are there any questions of the planner? Being none, the applicant here, yes, sir. Would you state your name for us, sir?
Good afternoon. It's Tom DeBoer with TD Consulting, acting on behalf of the owner.
Yeah, go ahead, sir.
Thank you very much. I just wanted to add one further comment, and thank you very much for the report. It was very well done. We are improving this one yet again, which is nice to see the houses being pushed further back from the water where they currently exist. We also went through the effort with Trans Severn Waterway to obtain a permit to fill the wet slip in. They have granted us permission to do so as of January 2024, but it's only in part, which would bring it to somewhere between 28-ish meters instead of the 25. We're permitted to basically fill in the first 2.5, 3 meters of the wet slip. The balance of it is prohibited from being filled, but that does increase that setback. We're not asking for that to change. It's just an option for an additional buffer in the future that could happen. Other than that, I have no other comments unless there's questions.
Questions of the applicant? All right, looks like there aren't any, sir. Thank you. Anyone on here? Well, I guess there's no one here. Anyone online wishing to speak in support of this application? In support of this application? Anyone online wishing to speak in opposition to this application? Opposition to this application? Committee, where are we? Ms. Archer? All right, Mr. Strangway, second. Any further comments or questions with respect to the motion on the floor? All those in favor? And that carries. Your application is approved, sir. All right. We're now dealing with file number D20-2024-014, and this is 83 William Street North, former town of Lindsay. Ms. Evans, go ahead.
Thank you. The subject property is designated residential under the Lindsay Secondary Plan and is zoned Central Commercial Special 11 Holding under the Town of Lindsay Zoning Bylaw 2000-75. The subject property is located at the center of Lindsay at the intersection of Wellington Street and William Street North, and it currently contains 2 commercial buildings which are vacant. The purpose of the application is to facilitate the construction of an 8-story, 110-unit apartment building. Council approved a site-specific official plan amendment and zoning bylaw amendment on June 20th, 2023 that are in force and effect. The current proposal is the same as what was approved through the OPA-ZBA process. Relief is required from section 14.3.12(2)(I) of the bylaw, which permits a maximum lot coverage of 55%. The proposed lot coverage is 63%. Through the current site plan application process, the approximate dimensions of the road widening and site triangle applied during the OPA-ZBA process were finalized, resulting in an approximately 305 square meter reduction in lot area, which effectively increased the lot coverage of the building. Relief is also required from section 14.3.12.2Q of the bylaw, which requires a minimum aisle width of 6.7 meters. The proposed aisle width is 6 meters. In developments of this nature, design refinements can be expected with approvals that are conditionally granted, subject to final agency review and detailed design at the final site plan stage. The property is designated residential under the Lindsay Secondary Plan, and this designation permits a variety of dwelling types, as well as 3 levels of density. This proposal would be considered high-density residential, which includes medium and high-rise residential apartment buildings and other residential buildings in excess of 4 stories in height, generally between 5 and 8 stories in height, with a maximum density of 125 dwelling units per hectare of land. The subject property is identified as being within the environmental constraint area, being within 120 meters of the Scugog River. An environmental impact study or other appropriate study shall be required for all development proposals on or abutting lands identified as environmental constraint. And as per the official plan, the city, in consultation with partner agencies, shall identify the appropriate scope and study area for each required EIS. The property is outside of Kawartha Region Conservation Authority regulated area, and based on the location of the proposed development, the studies that have been completed as part of the OPA-ZBA process, and the limited natural features on the site and adjacent to the site, staff feel it is reasonable to not require an EIS, and that the proposal is in keeping with the general intent and purpose of the secondary plan. The proposal complies with all provisions of the zoning bylaw, with the exception of the maximum lot coverage and minimum aisle width. The proposed lot coverage is 63% as a result of land conveyance to the municipality. The built form that was approved through the OPA-ZBA process is to remain the same, and the proposal is to comply with the minimum required landscape open space. The increased lot coverage is not anticipated to impact drainage. The intent of a minimum aisle width is to ensure there is adequate space for vehicles to negotiate a parking area. A traffic impact brief was prepared as part of the OPA-ZBA process, through which it was determined that a 6-meter wide aisle is sufficient for the circulation of traffic on site. These photos here show what the property looks like today, with the photo on the left having been taken from Wellington Street and the photo on the right taken from William Street North. And just for a bit of context, these are the renderings of what the proposed building is to look like. There are no anticipated impacts on environmental features, neighboring properties, or the function of the municipal right-of-way. No comments of concern were raised by any of the circulated agencies, and no comments were received from members of the public. Based on the contents of the report, staff acknowledges the application meets all 4 tests of a minor variance and respectfully recommends approval of the application subject to the conditions identified within the report. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Evans. I'm just curious, before I go to committee, you've indicated on page 4 of 7 in the top paragraph that as part of the OPA and ZBA, the following reviews were completed: a phase 1 and phase 2 environmental site assessment, a species at risk screening, a functional servicing report, a preliminary stormwater management report, a hydrogeological investigation, and a geotechnical investigation. Now, you've indicated these were reviews. What would an EIS add? That seems to be fairly involved.
To the chair, it really, at the end of the day, wouldn't add anything. The OPA that was done in 2023 was when the Town of Lindsay official plan was in place. And then since that time, actually quite recently, the Lindsay secondary plan has come into effect after being out of effect for a long period of time. And thus is a requirement under the Lindsay secondary plan. But these studies have already been completed and reviewed as part of that OPA-ZBA process. So the EIS wouldn't really add anything. There would be no value add there.
Committee. Ms. Archer?
Question to you, please, through you, not to you, through you, to the planner. It looks from the sketch that there's only 34 parking spaces for 110 units. Are there some underground that?
Through the chair, yes, there are, and if I could just bring up the sketch, I can read the number of parking spaces if you'd like.
I just want to make sure there was sufficient in it.
Yes, so the number of parking spaces was evaluated through that ZBA process, and they are in compliance there.
Mr. Erickson?
Concern is because of the reductions of the aisles, I assume through engineering, building, and emergency services, such as the fire department and ambulance, they're okay with the turning radius for each of them?
Ms. Evans?
Through the chair, the application was circulated to engineering and building, and there were no concerns flagged with the aisle width.
Another one, garbage disposal services.
Ms. Evans, the question was garbage disposal services a part of that investigation as well?
Through the chair, that would be managed through the site plan agreement, which would be a subsequent process here.
Anything further from committee? All right, being none, the applicant, do you wish to speak to it, sir?
Hi, good afternoon, everyone.
And your name, sir? Your name?
I'm Aditya Srinivas.
Thank you very much, sir. Go ahead.
I'm with EcoView and representing MDM Corporation today. I think Ms. Evans did a great job in describing the subject lands and the proposed development, so I don't have much to add. Just a couple of points to reiterate that the subject application is not going to change the principal use of this land. The reliefs that we are asking are quite minor. They're minor changes, and they're quite typical during the detailed design stage for a development of such scale. And as Ms. Evans mentioned, the reliefs do meet the 4 tests, and we don't believe that they have a significant impact on the development or the subject lands. Mr. Tom from MDM is also here, and both of us are happy to answer any questions that the committee or the public have. Thank you.
All right, thank you for that, sir. Are there any questions of the applicant? All right, being none, is there anyone online wishing to speak in support of this application? In support of this application? Anyone online wishing to speak in opposition to the application? Opposition to the application? Committee, Mr. Strangway.
As recommended by staff.
Do I have a seconder? Ms. Richardson. Any further comments or questions with respect to the motion on the floor? All right, all in favor? And that carries. Thank you. We can start again, so I'll call the meeting back to order. And we're now dealing with file number D20-2024-015. And this is 79 Fells Point Road, Geographic Township of Fenelon. Mr. Shahid, go ahead, sir.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. The subject property is situated on the northern shore of Cameron Lake with access from Fells Point Road. The area in which the property is located is predominantly residential, comprised of built form characterized by single detached dwellings and assorted accessory structures with varying proximities from both the road and shoreline. The property currently contains a one-story single detached dwelling with rear deck, 2 sheds, a cabin, and a boathouse. In terms of municipal legislation, the property is designated waterfront under the City of Kawartha Lakes official plan and zoned rural residential type 3 or the RR3 zone under the Township of Fenelon zoning bylaw. The subject minor variance application is to allow the property owners to obtain a building permit for an existing cabin. As part of the application, the shed in the front yard will be removed. For context, the cabin was originally constructed as a detached garage in the 1980s and converted into a cabin at some point in time. The current property owners are now seeking a change of use permit for the existing cabin in order to use the structure for residential purposes and not accessory uses typically associated with a detached garage. It is important to mention the cabin does not have any connection to plumbing and will be solely used for sleeping accommodation only. Relief is required from multiple sections of the zoning bylaw. Firstly, the zoning bylaw requires a minimum water setback of 15 meters. The existing water setback from the cabin remains unchanged at 8.7 meters. Secondly, the zoning bylaw requires a minimum 1.2 meter setback for all accessory structures from the primary residential building. The existing setback of the cabin from the dwelling remains unchanged at 1 meter. Thirdly, the zoning bylaw permits a cabin up to a maximum of 30 square meters. The existing cabin size remains unchanged at 37 square meters. And then lastly, the zoning bylaw states that a cabin may be permitted provided that the subject lot conforms to the minimum lot area and frontage requirements of the zone. The required minimum lot area and frontage of the RR3 zone is 2,000 square meters and 35 meters for frontage. The subject property is 1,011.71 square meters in size and 31.1 meters in frontage along Fells Point Road. The proposed water setback from the cabin, again, remains unchanged at 8.7 meters. It's important to reiterate that the use of the cabin is situated in a structure that was constructed prior to the zoning bylaw. As a result, the variance is not seeking to further encroach into the water setback, nor is it seeking to erect a new structure within the water setback. It is simply to recognize a change of use to an existing structure. The cabin itself is actually further away than 8.7 meters from the majority of the shoreline, but there's an existing boat slip that extends onto the property, creating a closer setback. Additionally, it is difficult to locate any of the structures closer to the street as there's an existing septic footprint in the front yard. The proposed setback from the cabin to the dwelling remains unchanged at 1 meter. Although deficient by 0.2 meters, this setback remains unchanged and will continue to allow for passageway between the front and rear yard. Additionally, a line of trees is present between the subject property and the neighboring property, and moving the existing cabin closer to the side lot line may require the removal or alteration to that existing tree vegetation. The zoning bylaw permits a cabin up to a maximum of 30 square meters as an accessory use. As the cabin is situated in a pre-existing structure, it is restricted to that same building footprint. Additionally, the cabin will remain subordinate to the dwelling as it is still approximately a quarter of the ground floor area of the current dwelling. In order to have a cabin, the zoning bylaw requires a property to conform to the minimum lot area and frontage requirements of its applicable zone. The size of the lot, although undersized for the RR3 zone, is in line with many of the lots along Fells Point Road. Additionally, as no new structures are being proposed and one of the accessory structures are being removed, any potential issues for overcrowding will be avoided, and there's no issue with lot coverage. All in all, the application does not propose a new structure and is only seeking relief to allow for the permitted use of a cabin in a pre-existing structure. Moving on to comments, after the writing of the report, Kawartha Conservation stated they have no concerns with the approval of the minor variance and that the applicant has already obtained a permit for the proposed project. In conclusion, based on the contents of the report, staff acknowledges the application meets all 4 tests of a minor variance and respectfully recommends approval of the application subject to the conditions identified within the report. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Are there questions of the planner? Ms. Archer?
Through you, please, to the planner, why did this come to us? Like, why didn't they just start sleeping in it? And like, is this a complaint-driven thing?
Through the chair. So this is an enforcement matter. That's all I can say for that. I'm not sure exactly how it came through, but it is an enforcement matter.
Mr. Steinway?
Just really a follow-up question to Ms. Archer. How long ago was this converted from a garage into a cabin? I see it says sometime after 1980, was it? So could this have existed for 30, 40 years?
Through the chair. I think that would be a better question for the applicant. As far as I know, when I spoke to the property owner, when he had purchased the property, it was a cabin, and I'm not sure exactly at what point in time it was converted, but I'm sure the applicant might be able to answer that for you.
Okay, thank you very much.
Anything further from committee? I have a question, Mr. Shaheen. What we indicated that this cabin, although they're going to use it for residential purposes, but that looks like sleeping accommodation, so there is no cooking or sanitary facilities. So what is the connection between this application and the fact that Building and Septic want a condition regarding a sewage permit system? What is that all about? How is it connected to the application to recognize the cabin?
Through the chair, I believe the applicant can answer that question.
We do have a condition with respect, a specific condition with respect to that, and yet we're looking at the purpose and effect is to facilitate obtainment of a building permit for an existing cabin which does not have any sanitary or cooking facilities. So I'm just curious as to what the connection would be, why we would have a condition for that. Mr. Erickson, question?
From Building and Septic on the bottom of page 5 of 9, that's where they mention it. I would think they just want to make sure that there will not be a connection.
Further of the planner? All right, the applicant, you wish to speak to it, sir. And just for procedural purposes, give us your name again.
Good afternoon, it's Tom DeBoer, TD Consulting.
Thank you, sir, go ahead.
Couple of answers to the questions. How this came about, first of all, we don't know how long the cabin has existed. I attended the neighboring property some 5 years ago to assist that owner, and the cabin was there at that point. That I can assure you, because we looked on both properties for access in order to get to the waterfront of the adjacent property. So I know it's been there for at least 5 years. Second, and this is prior to the current owner occupying the place. Secondly, the owner took it upon himself to, who is a contractor, who should have known better, took it upon himself to attempt to replace the septic system as there was some issues with it. During that time, there was a violation reported both by municipal law enforcement, and Kawartha Conservation was notified at the same time. So the precedence was set to say, okay, we got to investigate this as part of the process of obtaining a new septic permit to actually bring the septic system into fruition. There's an assessment for the overall development of the property. Because there's no sanitary facilities within the cabin, the bedrooms and the floor space are still part of the septic calculations, which has caused the septic to become larger, and therefore we need a permit to replace it. So it's a simple it's a simple mathematical calculation that because it's habitable space, we have to incorporate that in. So when the original septic system for the cottage, it did not account for the square footage, although albeit small, nor did it account for the bedroom facility that's inside of that cabin. So those had to be added to the septic calculation to generate a new footprint for the updated septic system. In doing so, enforcement realized that the cabin was not a permitted use at the time based on its size and location, and that's why we came for the minor variance. So it's a bit of a convoluted process to get here, so I appreciate your concern, but it essentially started with somebody excavating his front lawn when he shouldn't have. And that's where we got to today. So it's just a rolling sort of process to get to where we are today. It was simple. They dug the lawn to replace the septic, then they realized there was more to the septic than originally was perceived, and therefore we had to go for the minor variance.
All right, did you wish to speak to it further? No. Any further questions of the applicant? Clear as mud. Clear as mud. All right, but thank you for that. I do appreciate. All right. Anyone online wishing to speak in support of this application? In support of the application? Anyone online wishing to speak in opposition to the application? Opposition to the application? Committee.
As recommended by staff.
Questions with respect to the motion on the floor? All those in favor? And that carries. Your application is approved, sir. We're now dealing with file number D20-2024-016, and this is vacant lot on Fisher Road, former town of Lindsay. Ms. Evans, go ahead.
Thank you. The subject property is designated residential under the Lindsay Secondary Plan and is zoned residential to Special 18 under the Town of Lindsay zoning bylaw. The subject property is located in a new subdivision in the southeastern portion of Lindsay, which contains new development at varying stages of completion. The subject property contains a dwelling that has been partially constructed. The purpose of the application is to facilitate the construction of a new single detached dwelling. Relief is required from section 7.3.23I of the bylaw, which requires a minimum front yard setback of 6 meters. The proposed setback is 2.3 meters from the stairs and 4.7 meters from the front porch. This is a rendering that shows the model type that is to be constructed on this lot. Due to the change in grade on this particular property, stairs are required to access the dwelling from the driveway. Instead of in this model photo where the front lawn is level with the driveway, there would actually be stairs connecting them. The proposed front porch will provide visual interest to the front of the dwelling while providing shelter from the elements when entering and exiting. The subject property is designated residential under the Town of Lindsay Secondary Plan, and this designation permits a variety of dwelling types and 3 levels of residential density based on the availability of services, compatibility with surrounding uses, and locational factors. The proposal would be considered low-density residential development. These photos show the dwelling that is under construction, with the stairs being at the front. The proposal complies with all provisions of the zoning bylaw with the exception of the minimum front yard setback. It is not anticipated that the proposed reduced setback will impact street maintenance or sight lines, and there will be adequate visual and physical separation between the porch and stairs and the traveled portion of the road. The photo on the left is more of a side view of the subject property, and the photo on the right is the area where the street will eventually be. As the majority of the lots on the street are currently vacant, really the character of the streetscape has yet to be established. However, the completed portion of the subdivision to the west contains a variety of dwelling models with varying front yard setbacks, and it is not anticipated that the dwelling on the subject property will be out of character with existing and future development. There are no anticipated impacts on environmental features, neighboring properties, or the function of the municipal right-of-way. No comments of concern were raised by any of the circulated agencies, and no comments were received from members of the public. Based on the contents of the report, staff acknowledges the application meets all 4 tests of a minor variance and respectfully recommends approval of the application subject to the conditions identified within the report. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Evans. Mr. Strangwick?
Thank you, Ms. Evans. Just one really quick question. Being a new subdivision and then it's having to come to Committee of Adjustments, is this going to be a one-of on this lot, or are we going to be looking at a whole series of houses on the street?
Through the chair, this is the only lot that we've been made aware of as needing the minor variance. It was flagged by the building division. I believe it's because of the unique grade of this particular lot in the subdivision that the stairs are required and that the setback is where it is being reduced from what is permitted under this particular zone category.
Thank you, I appreciate that.
Mr. McKinnon, did you have a comment? I saw you nodding there.
Through you, your chair, I was just agreeing with Catherine, that's all.
Mr. Erickson?
Through the chair, out of curiosity, is there a cold cellar under the front steps there?
You probably don't know, I guess. Yeah, they're nodding no.
Through the chair, I don't believe I've been provided plans to show that, but I can double check the file if it's of concern of the committee.
Not necessary, but if there is a cold cellar, that makes this even more important and favorable. I tried to get there yesterday, but with the heavy equipment and all the mud, I didn't bother.
I hear what you're saying because I'm thinking back to Jennings Creek and the decks there. So, yeah, good question. Good question. Anything further to the planner? All right. Is the applicant online? Does the applicant wish to speak to the application? All right. Doesn't look like it. Anyone online wishing to speak in support of this application? In support of the application? Anyone online wishing to speak in opposition to the application? Opposition to the application. Committee. Ms. Archer. Do I have a seconder? Mr. Strangway. Any further comments or questions with respect to the motion on the floor? All in favor? And that carries. Thank you. Now dealing with file number D20-2024-017, and this is 11 Albert Street South, former town of Lindsay. Mr. Shahid, go ahead, sir.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Subject property is located west of the intersection of Russell Street West and Albert Street South in the former town of Lindsay. The neighborhood is predominantly residential in the form of single detached dwellings, with the exclusion of the neighboring property to the north, which contains a 6-story apartment complex. The property itself contains a single detached dwelling and a temporary tent canopy car shelter. In terms of municipal legislation, the property is designated urban settlement area under the City of Kawartha Lake's official plan and residential under the newly in effect Lindsay Secondary Plan. The property is also zoned Residential 1 under the Town of Lindsay zoning bylaw. The proposal is to remove the existing temporary tent canopy car shelter and construct a detached garage in the side yard. The existing car shelter will be removed immediately prior to the construction of the proposed detached garage. Relief is required from two provisions of the zoning bylaw. Firstly, the zoning bylaw requires a 1.25 meter setback from an interior side lot line for accessory structures. The proposed side yard setback is 0.51 meters. In relation to that, the zoning bylaw permits encroachment of roofs and other overhanging projections up to a maximum of 0.6 meters into any yard. The proposed encroachment into the side yard from the overhang of the roof's eave is 1.2 meters. The proposed detached garage will be placed on an existing paved area, mitigating any potential impacts to the existing drainage pattern of the property. With regards to access, the proposed 0.51 meter side yard setback between the garage and the side lot line, although deficient, is larger than the average shoulder width and will accommodate passageway and access in that space if need be. Additionally, there's 1.74 meters between the proposed garage and the dwelling for access between the front and rear yards on the northern side of the dwelling. With regards to the encroachment of the overhanging roof, the roof projects 1.2 meters into the required interior side yard. The resulting setback from the edge of the overhang is 0.05 meters. Although deficient, the proposed garage avoids any projection or encroachment into the neighboring property. The neighboring property to the north, containing the apartment complex, features a front yard with green space. So as a result, the proposed garage is not directly situated beside any neighboring structures or buildings. I should also mention that although the setback from the roof is 0.05 meters to the side lot line, the roof is approximately 2.7 meters from finished grade in height, which in turn will negate any issue with passing through the passageway. In terms of comments, the Development Engineering Division commented that they have no objection to the minor variance application, but requested the applicant to confirm that the proposed downspouts are not directed towards a neighboring property to the north. After the writing of the report, I did confirm with the applicant that the downspouts will be directed to the rear yard of the property and not the side yard or any neighboring property. No other major comments were made. Based on the contents of the report, staff acknowledges application meets all four tests of a minor variance and respectfully recommends approval of the application subject to the conditions identified within the report. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Shahid. I'm just curious as to how development and engineering are going to enforce that downspout issue, but no, well, that's for another day. Any questions of the planner?
Just want to process through the chair. That's a rental apartment building next door. Would the residents necessarily get notice of application or just the actual owner of the apartment building?
Mr. Shahid?
Through the chair, sorry, through the chair would just be the owner of the land.
Okay. Yep. Any further questions of the planner? All right. Is the applicant online? Does the applicant wish to speak to the application? All right. Being none. Is there anyone online wishing to speak in support of this application? Support of this application. Anyone online wishing to speak in opposition to the application? Opposition to the application. Everybody's agreeable today. Do I have a motion? Ms. Richardson? All right. Do I have a seconder? Mr. Erickson? Any further comments or questions with respect to the motion on the floor? All those in favor? And that carries. So we'll move on to file number D20-2024-020, and this is 3 Jackson Street, Geographic Township of Members. Mr. Shahid, go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. The subject property is situated in the hamlet of Bethany in the Geographic Township of Manvers. According to the Municipal Property Assessment Corporation, or MPAC, The residential build form within the neighborhood is primarily comprised of 1 to 2-story dwellings constructed as early as the late 1800s with various levels of renovations and additions. In terms of municipal legislation, the property is designated Hamlet Settlement Area under the City of Kawartha Lakes official plan and zoned rural residential type 2 or the RR2 zone under the Township of Manvers zoning bylaw. The proposal is to facilitate the construction of a new 2-story dwelling with an attached garage. To provide some context, a previous minor variance application was approved to facilitate the construction of a residential addition to an existing dwelling. The proposal was altered to instead construct a new single detached dwelling and attached garage within the same footprint. However, it was found from a survey report during the construction process that further relief is required from those same provisions provided relief in the previous application. As a result, the property currently contains a 2-story dwelling and detached garage in the process of construction with 2 sheds and a trailer in the rear yard. As shown on Appendix C and D, 2 accessory structures will be removed from the rear yard when construction is completed. Relief is required from 2 provisions. Firstly, the minimum front yard setback of 2.45 meters approved under the previous minor variance application. The proposed front yard setback is 2.29 meters. Secondly, the maximum lot coverage of 29.5% approved under the previous minor variance application also needs relief. The proposed lot coverage is 30%. The proposed front yard setback, 2.29 meters, in comparison to the previous approved 2.45 meters. Apologies for that. So although there is a change in setback, the discrepancy is minimal and continues to maintain the intent of the zoning bylaw for the reasons mentioned in the report. There's adequate separation between the dwelling and the traveled portion of the road, as a sidewalk separates the subject property from the street. Additionally, as seen on the image on the slide, the proposed dwelling aligns with the established building line of the neighboring property as well. The proposed maximum lot coverage of 30% is a minimal change to the previously approved maximum allowance of 29.5%. The proposal continues to maintain the intent of this provision by allowing for open space to their compliant side yard setbacks and large rear yard. Additionally, the removal of the 2 accessory structures from the rear yard will aid in mitigating clutter and creating more open space. All in all, the proposed variances are minimal discrepancies to the previous approved application. No comments were received after the writing of the report. Based on the contents of the report, staff acknowledges the application meets all 4 tests of a minor variance and respectfully recommends approval of the application subject to the conditions identified within the report. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Are there any questions of the planner? Mr. Erickson?
It's not a question, but when I looked at this original application last year, I thought it would have been better just to bulldoze everything and start over, which they're doing.
All right, anything else from committee? All right, being none. Is the applicant online? Does the applicant wish to speak to the application?
I'm here if anyone has any questions. Kelly Palmer.
What is your name, sir?
Kelly Palmer.
Oh, all right, thank you. Didn't hear that the first time. Are there any questions?
Sorry, sir.
So, yeah, you're looking for questions?
If anyone has any questions, I'm here to answer them. Yes, sir.
Yeah, thank you. Are there any questions of the applicant? All right, looks like none, sir. Thank you very much for taking the time.
Thank you.
All right, is there anyone online wishing to speak in, excuse me, support of this application, support of the application? Anyone online wishing to speak in opposition to this application, opposition to the application? Committee, where are we? Ms. Richardson.
As recommended by staff.
And seconded by Mr. Strangway. Any further comments or questions with respect to the motion on the floor? Being none, all those in favor, and that carries. Your application is approved, sir.
Thank you, sir. Thank you.
All right. We don't have any deferred applications, no consents, under other business. Anything from staff?
Sure, thank you. Just a couple of pieces by way of update. We've mentioned or referred to the rural zoning bylaw project a number of times this afternoon. There has been a notice circulated across the community in a number of different ways, advertising an upcoming special public meeting for the rural zoning bylaw project. That's April the 10th in the evening. It commences at 7 o'clock and it will be in hybrid format, so live streaming available as well as in-person attendance. That's April 10th, 7 o'clock. Culmination of many years of hard work. We're quite excited. Statutory public meeting for the rural zoning bylaw project. And for the benefit of the committee members, you're certainly pulling your weight in the absence of a member. We have gone through our recruitment process to interview candidate members for the committee. That took about 2 weeks. Our interviews are now done. Mr. Leahy joined me on that panel, as did our mayor. So we'll be preparing our recommendation report to council at their April 30th meeting, and that's a confidential staff report. And following council's decision at that April 30th meeting, we will notify the candidates and shortly onboard our newest recruit for the May meeting. Yes, for the May C of A meeting.
Anything further from staff? All right, no.
Any real wood here? I think we're doing just fine, thank you. Yes, we are, thank you.
Anything further from committee? All right, sounds like a quiet day, all right. So our next meeting is Thursday, April the 25th at 1 p.m. That's the first day of turkey season. It's not right. All right. Anyway, that being said, I need an adjournment. Ms. Richardson, Mr. Strangway, all those in favor? And that carries. Thank you.